On my 27th birthday, San Francisco glimmered like it wanted to forget itself. The bay shimmered, the fog sulked above the hills, and the air smelled faintly of sea salt and rain-cleaned asphalt. Inside Atelier Cren, light fractured through crystal glasses and laughter echoed across marble tables. My parents fit perfectly here, polished, effortless, expensive. I'd learned long ago to move quietly in their world, the way a child learns to hold her breath underwater. "Happy birthday, Eve," my mother said, leaning in to brush her lips against my cheek. The perfume hit first, roses and power. My father smiled from across the table, his cufflinks catching the chandelier. "Another year older, another year wiser," he said. I smiled back, the way you smile when the camera's already focused. But I was exhausted. Unemployed. Freelancing from a tiny apartment in the Mission, praying my landlord would forget rent for one more week. Still, I showed up, in the same black dress I wore to interviews and funerals. Because in my family, attendance was loyalty. Then Grandpa Robert arrived. He was the anomaly, tall, silver-haired, still commanding a room without raising his voice. He'd built his empire on shipping routes and silence. My mother stiffened when she saw him. "Dad? I didn't know you were in town." "I wouldn't miss my granddaughter's birthday," he said. His voice carried warmth, and something else, like a quiet test. He took his seat beside me, ordered whiskey neat, and turned to me with a soft smile. "Evelyn, how's your work these days?" I hesitated. "Freelancing. Trying to find something stable." He nodded slowly, eyes glinting. "And how do you spend your inheritance?" The air fractured. Forks froze mid-motion. "Inheritance?" I said. My mother laughed too quickly. "Dad, really? Let's not." But he didn't blink. "Yes, the trust fund I set aside when she was born." "Surely you've told her." My father's throat moved. "Robert, Where is it?" Grandpa asked softly. Silence clung to the table like static. I felt every heartbeat like a hammer. That moment didn't feel like a question. It felt like judgment. That night, I walked home under a sky smeared with fog and neon. My phone buzzed, unread messages, unpaid bills, unspoken words. I should have been angry, but what I felt was colder, a realization that something had always been hidden behind our family's perfect photos. When I got home, Madison, my roommate, my sanity, looked up from her laptop. "How was dinner?" I dropped my heels at the door. Like a hostage negotiation without the honesty. She frowned. "You okay?" I poured wine into a chipped mug. My grandfather asked about a trust fund. "Apparently, I have one." Or, had. Her eyes widened. "Wait, seriously?" "Yeah." And judging by my parents' faces, it wasn't just a misunderstanding. The room felt too small for the size of the truth. Madison sat beside me. "What are you gonna do?" "I don't know." I stared at the rain sliding down the window. "But I think he does." 2 days later, I got an invitation, embossed envelope, no return address, just my name in looping handwriting. "Evelyn, lunch. Tomorrow, noon. Bring no one to RH." Grandpa's initials. When I arrived, the restaurant was quiet, sun spilling through glass walls. He was already there, sipping tea instead of whiskey. "You came," he said. "You sent an order, not an invite," I replied. He smiled. Still sharp. "I like that." He slid a small envelope across the table. Inside was a single page, a statement from an old trust account, the header dated 27 years ago. $1 million initial, I read aloud. Zero balance. My stomach dropped. What happened? That's what I intend to find out, he said. But money's only the surface. I looked up. Meaning? He leaned back. Families don't collapse over figures. They collapse over silence. Yours is decades deep. The way he said it made my skin prickle. Why tell me now? I asked. Because, he said quietly, I don't have long. And what you inherit from me can't be wired to an account. That night, I couldn't sleep. I opened my laptop, typed Robert Hart Legacy Holdings into the search bar. Dozens of articles appeared, awards, donations, scandals avoided. But there was a name I didn't recognize, Clara Hart Foundation, founded 3 years before I was born. Clara Hart, my grandmother. She died when my mother was 18. The website was plain, for those who choose compassion over convenience. Under the mission statement was a single line in quotation marks. The wealth we hoard rots. The love we share compounds. It felt like a riddle, one written for me. The next morning, I met Grandpa again, this time in his office. It wasn't an office, really. It was a cathedral of glass, overlooking the city like a judgment. He handed me a faded envelope. From your grandmother, he said. Found in the Foundation's archives. I opened it carefully. The paper smelled like cedar and dust. For the one who listens after the noise ends, the real inheritance isn't numbers. It's memory. Find the 3 who remember the truth. No signature, no date. Just a small pressed violet folded inside. What does it mean? I whispered. He smiled sadly. That's for you to uncover. For the next week, I searched. Old family albums. Newspaper archives. Obituaries. My grandmother's name appeared beside 3 women, Helen Duval, Nora Price, and Lillian May. 3 friends. All volunteers at the old Mission Street shelter, demolished years ago. I drove there anyway. The lot was empty, fenced off, a for lease sign flapping in the wind. But across the street stood a tiny bookstore, the Violet Hour. The name sent a shiver down my spine. Inside, the bell chimed softly. The air smelled like ink and dust. An elderly woman looked up from behind the counter. Can I help you? I'm looking for someone named Helen Duval. Her eyes softened. You must be Evelyn. I froze. She told me you'd come one day, the woman said. She passed last spring. But she left something for you. She disappeared into the back and returned with a small box tied in violet ribbon. My fingers trembled as I untied it. Inside was a photograph, my grandmother, young and laughing, arm around a woman with gray eyes. On the back, the first truth, forgiveness begins where explanation fails. Beneath it, a key. Number 27, engraved with the initials MSS. Mission Street Shelter, the woman said quietly. The lockers are still in the basement. The building's condemned, but the key's yours. That night, Madison insisted on coming with me. This is insane, she said, stepping over broken tiles and graffiti. You sure about this? No, I said. But it feels like I've been asleep my whole life. Maybe this is how I wake up. The basement smelled like rust and salt. Rows of dented lockers lined the wall. My hand shook as I slid the key into 27. It turned with a reluctant click. Inside was a single notebook wrapped in plastic. The cover read, Ledger of Kindness, CH. We sat on the concrete floor, using our phones for light. The pages weren't numbers but names, dozens of them. Next to each, small notes in my grandmother's handwriting. Paid rent for a widow. Bought school shoes for a child. Visited Victoria Hart, told her she's enough. I froze at my mother's name. Victoria Hart, Madison whispered. Your mom? Yeah. Underneath, my grandmother had written. She hides fear behind perfection. One day, her daughter will teach her to forgive herself. My throat tightened. This wasn't a ledger of charity. It was a map of redemption. And suddenly, the missing trust fund made sense, not as money lost, but compassion misplaced. The next morning, I brought the notebook to Grandpa. He ran a finger down the pages, his eyes glistening. Clara's handwriting, he murmured. I'd forgotten how fierce she was. Why didn't you tell me about this before? I asked. Because, he said, I didn't know it existed. She kept her heart separate from my accounts. I hesitated. Grandpa, did Mom know about this? He sighed. She knew pieces. But she chose the numbers, not the meaning. He closed the notebook gently. Evelyn, what do you see in these pages? People trying to be seen, I said. Love spent quietly. He nodded. Then you understand more than I ever did. That night, alone in my apartment, I read every page. The more I read, the clearer the picture became, not of money stolen, but of compassion lost in translation. My grandmother had built a secret trust fund of kindness, investing in people instead of profits. Each act, each name, was an inheritance waiting to be remembered. And my mother, she'd been one of the first beneficiaries. Somewhere between grief and greed, she'd forgotten. A week later, an email arrived from my grandfather's assistant, Michelle. Mr. Hart requests your presence at the Foundation Gala this Friday. Formal attire. He will make an announcement. I almost didn't go. But curiosity, or fate, won. The ballroom shimmered with old wealth and new guilt. Photographers flashed, politicians smiled, champagne flowed. When Grandpa took the stage, the room hushed. Tonight, he began, we honor not wealth accumulated, but love circulated. He gestured for me to join him. My heart hammered as I walked up. This is my granddaughter, Evelyn, he said. She reminded me what inheritance truly means. He opened the ledger. My late wife Clara created this record, a trust not of money, but mercy. Today, we reopen it as the Heart Fund of Grace. Applause rippled through the room, polite and puzzled. Then his tone softened. And its first steward is Evelyn Hart. I froze. Grandpa. He leaned close. The money was never missing. I moved it years ago, waiting for someone who'd understand why it mattered. My breath caught. He smiled. You passed the only test that counts. You cared. The applause faded like waves retreating from shore. I stood on the stage, blinded by chandeliers, trembling behind the practiced smile I'd worn since childhood. Grandpa's words hung in the air, you cared. I wanted to believe that was enough. But caring had never paid my rent, mended my family, or rewritten years of silence. When the crowd dispersed, I found him near the exit, sipping water instead of whiskey. That was a lot, I said. He smiled faintly. I know. Did you really have to do that in public? He met my eyes, unflinching. Sometimes the only way to heal a family built on appearances is to shatter the mirror. I looked around the glittering room, men in tuxedos, women in sequined armor, champagne laughter like glass breaking. And what if the mirror fights back? He chuckled softly. Then you hold steady until it sees what it's reflecting. That night, I drove home through the city, the skyline glittering like a lie that wanted to be forgiven. When I reached my apartment, my mother was waiting outside. Her red coat glowed under the streetlight, her arms crossed tight. So, she said, voice calm and sharp, you've replaced me now? I froze. Mom. I had to hear it from reporters, Evelyn. That you're suddenly in charge of the foundation? That you've been meeting your grandfather behind my back? Her tone was more wounded than angry, which somehow hurt more. "I didn't plan this," I said quietly. "He invited me." "You always had a talent for showing up at the perfect moment," she said, her smile brittle. "Mom, it's not what you think." "Oh, it's exactly what I think." She stepped closer, perfume familiar and suffocating. "He's pitting us against each other. The same way he pitted me against him. You think he's giving you freedom, but he's just passing you the leash." Her words hit harder than I expected. "This isn't about money," I said. "Then what is it about, Evelyn?" "Because it was never about love. Not in this family." Something in her voice cracked, thin and frightened. I swallowed. "Maybe it could be now." She laughed once, bitterly. "You sound just like her." "Like Grandma?" Her eyes shimmered. "Don't say her name to me." "Why?" "She loved you. She pitied me," Mom snapped. "All her kindness, her charity, she never believed I was enough." "You think she wrote that ledger for strangers?" "It was a confession. Every act of goodness was her apology for not loving me properly." She turned to leave, heels sharp against the pavement. "You'll see one day, Evelyn. Love isn't an inheritance. It's a debt. And someone always ends up paying the interest." I didn't sleep. Her words replayed over and over, twisting themselves into questions I didn't know how to answer. Was love just a debt, passed down like an unbalanced ledger? By dawn, I decided to face the past head-on. The next morning, I drove to Marin County, to the house I grew up in. The gate recognized my car and swung open like muscle memory. The house looked smaller than I remembered, as if time had finally stopped pretending. Inside, everything was too clean. Too quiet. My father was in the kitchen, reading the paper, his glasses perched on the edge of his nose. He looked up, startled. "Evelyn?" "Morning," I said softly. He blinked, uncertain. "Your mother didn't tell me you were coming." "She didn't know." He folded the paper carefully. "I saw the news." "Congratulations." "It's not about congratulations." "I know." He paused. "She's taking it hard." "I figured." He sighed. "Your grandfather always had his way. I learned that early." I leaned against the counter. "Is that why you never fought him?" His eyes lifted slowly, tired but still sharp. "You think I didn't try? Did you?" He chuckled without humor. "Evelyn, in this family, we don't raise our voices. We raise our glass." The way he said it made me ache. "Dad, did Grandma ever talk to you about the foundation?" His expression shifted, wary. "Once. Years ago. She said it wasn't about charity, but continuation." I didn't understand her then. "And now?" He looked down at his hands. "Now I think she meant that kindness is the only way we survive our own mistakes." "Then why didn't you tell Mom?" "Because she wasn't ready to hear it." He met my eyes. "Maybe you are." I nodded slowly. "I'm trying." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe that's the difference." That afternoon, I sat in my car outside their house for a long time, staring at the manicured lawn, the sterile perfection. My mother's red car glinted in the driveway like a warning light. When I finally drove away, I didn't go home. I went back to the Violet Hour. The same elderly woman was there, sorting through old books. "You found the ledger," she said. "Yes." "Then you must be here for the second truth." I froze. "The second truth?" She smiled, slow and knowing. "Your grandmother never stopped writing. She left a series of letters, for the 3 women who helped her build the shelter. Each one had a different lesson. Helen's was forgiveness. Nora's was remembrance. Lillian's, well, that one was never delivered. Do you know where Lillian is? She nodded toward the back. Upstairs apartment, 3rd floor. Been waiting years for someone to knock. Lillian May's door was painted blue, faded from the sun. I knocked twice. A voice called, "It's open." Inside, the apartment was cluttered with plants, paintings, and dust that glittered in the light. An elderly woman sat by the window, knitting. "You must be Clara's granddaughter," she said without turning. "Yes. Evelyn." She smiled. "You look like her around the eyes." I sat across from her. "You knew her well?" "Better than most. We worked side by side for 10 years. She used to say love is a muscle, it atrophies when you stop using it." She reached into a drawer and pulled out an envelope sealed in wax. "She left this for you." My heart stuttered. "For me?" She said one day, her granddaughter would need to remember that mercy is not weakness. I broke the seal with shaking hands. Inside was a short letter. "To the one who will carry what I could not, do not let silence make you cruel. The rich inherit money. The wounded inherit mercy. Spend it freely, and you will never run out. Clara." I read it twice, the words blurring through tears. Lillian watched me quietly. She believed your mother could change. But she also knew change rarely blooms where control grows. I nodded slowly. She was right. "You can still break the pattern," she said gently. "But only if you stop fighting to win, and start listening to understand." That night, I sat on the balcony of my apartment, the bay lights flickering like distant candles. I read my grandmother's letter again and again, until the words became rhythm. Mercy is not weakness, the wounded inherit mercy, spend it freely. It felt like she was whispering through time. Madison joined me outside, wrapping herself in a blanket. "You okay?" "I think so," I said softly. "I just keep realizing how much pain hides behind the word family." She nodded. "Yeah. Love's messy. But it's still worth cleaning up." I smiled. "You sound like Grandma." "I sound like a woman who needs wine." We both laughed, the kind that breaks the tension without solving it. But inside, something shifted. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was drowning in my family's shadow. I felt like I was finally standing in the doorway, deciding whether to step into the light. The following week, I met with Grandpa at the foundation office, now technically my office. He looked smaller than before, the lines on his face etched deeper. "You've been busy," he said. "I found her letters." He smiled faintly. "I hoped you would." I placed the notebook and the new letter on his desk. She wasn't building a charity. She was building a mirror. He raised an eyebrow. "A mirror?" "Yes. To reflect what people refuse to see, their own capacity for kindness." He leaned back, nodding slowly. "You've inherited her clarity." I hesitated. "And her sadness." "Maybe. But sadness isn't failure, Evelyn. It's the tax you pay for caring." He looked at me for a long time, then said quietly, "There's something you should know." He opened a drawer and slid out a sealed envelope. Clara left one more letter. "For Victoria." My chest tightened. "For my mother?" He nodded. "She never read it." I kept it, hoping one day she'd be ready. He placed it in my hand. "Maybe she still can be." I stared at the envelope for hours before deciding to drive back to Marin. When Mom opened the door, she looked tired, her makeup perfect, her eyes hollow. "Evelyn." "I'm not here to fight," I said. "I found something for you." I held out the envelope. She froze, recognition flashing across her face. She left that for me? Yes. Her hands trembled as she took it. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she whispered, I used to dream about this. Every birthday, I'd think, maybe she left something. Maybe she was sorry. She was, I said softly. But she also wanted you to forgive yourself. She looked up sharply. You read it? No. But I read the others. Silence stretched between us, heavy but not hostile. Finally, she tore the seal open. The paper inside was thin, fragile with age. She read silently, lips moving. Then tears began to fall, not dramatic, not performed. Real. When she finished, she looked at me. She wrote that she loved me the way I couldn't love myself. And that she hoped one day I'd stop mistaking control for care. Her voice broke. Evelyn, I don't know how to fix what I did to you. You don't have to, I said quietly. Just stop pretending it didn't happen. We stood there, two women holding the ruins of generations, unsure how to rebuild, but willing to try. She reached out, hesitated, then hugged me. For the first time, it didn't feel like performance. It felt like surrender. Later that night, I sat with Grandpa again. She read it, I said. He nodded. And? I think she finally stopped running. He smiled, eyes glassy. Then Clara can rest. He coughed lightly, then added, so can I. I frowned. Don't say that. He squeezed my hand. Evelyn, you've already taken what matters. The rest is just maintenance. The room felt heavy with unspoken goodbyes. Grandpa, I whispered, what if forgiveness doesn't last? Then you forgive again, he said softly. Until it does. Grandpa's office felt different that morning, softer somehow. His desk wasn't a fortress anymore. It was just wood. The city outside the glass moved as it always did, buses sighing, bikes gliding, the bay breathing in fog and exhaling light, but in here, time held its breath. He looked tired. Not weak, just complete. I have one last thing for you, he said, lifting a small velvet box from the drawer and setting it between us. Open it. Inside was a key, old brass, worn to a dull glow. A tiny violet was etched at its head. What is this? He smiled. The end of an old story. The beginning of your own. I turned the key in my hand. It was heavier than it looked. Where does it go? To a building I never had the courage to open, he said. Your grandmother wanted a place where mercy could live. Not a gala. Not a headline. A door that never locked to the right person. I bought the property. And then I got busy keeping the world impressed with me. His voice thinned, then steadied. I would like you to open it. I swallowed. What would we call it? He lifted a hand and tapped the ledger. The pressed violet inside rustled like a small memory. Clara called it a ledger. You call it a house. I nodded. Violet House. He smiled through wet eyes. Spend it freely, Eve. The phrase landed like a promise, and a charge. We didn't say goodbye that day. We said later. He squeezed my hand and told me to send him photos when the door opened. I said I would. And I meant it. The property sat on a quiet block in the Mission, a faded brick building with boarded windows, graffiti blooming like stubborn weeds. Someone had painted a crooked heart on the side. The front door was iron and dignity. Madison was already there, holding hot coffees and a toolkit she definitely didn't know how to use. She bounced on her toes when she saw the key. This is it, she whispered. This is it, I said. The key slid into the lock and paused like a held breath. Then it turned, slow, reluctant, inevitable. Inside smelled like dust, lemon oil, and history. Sunlight fell through high windows in clean, angled sheets. There were hallways that wanted to be walked. Rooms that wanted to be named. We paced the space slowly, our footsteps echoing like questions and answers finally meeting. "What happens here?" Madison asked. Everything in me wanted to say we rescue people, but that wasn't it. Rescue can be tidy. This would not be. People come in, I said, and we don't make them prove they deserve help. We just help. Food, legal aid, job connections. A quiet room where someone can breathe. A small envelope when the rent is late. A phone call returned. A name remembered. Madison smiled. A ledger rewritten. Yeah, I said. In people. We found a small office in the back and set the ledger on an empty desk like an altar. I ran my hand across the first page. Paid rent for a widow. I could almost see my grandmother's hand moving, not counting, not calculating, just recording the fact that love had been spent and therefore multiplied. Let's start there, I said. The first week was chaos disguised as purpose. Contractors. Licensing. Permits that seemed to breed at night. Every form required a different form to prove that the form was a form. I learned to keep snacks in my purse and kindness in my voice when the city clerk sighed at me for the third time. But there were also miracles. Small ones, the kind that arrive in work boots. A carpenter named Luis offered to repair the front steps, for whatever you can pay. A woman from the bodega next door brought empanadas and refused money. An artist painted the crooked heart straight and layered violets through it, then asked if he could put his mother's name in the corner. We said yes and watched him cry without apology. Word spread, not like gossip, like invitation. People came with what they had. Time. A skill. A story they were ready to set down. I learned that the city would always break your heart, but if you stayed long enough, it would hand you the pieces and say, "Here, try again." Every evening, I sent Grandpa photos, boxes being carried in, sunlight on new paint, the first coat of deep, warm violet on the foyer wall. He responded with short messages that felt like fingers pressing encouragement into my shoulders. Good. Keep going. Your grandmother would be unbearable with pride. Remember to eat. I sent him a photo of the key on a nail by the door. He responded, "That key is you. You turn. You open. The room is already there." The night before our opening, I couldn't sleep. The city hummed with noise I usually loved, and suddenly hated. I stood on the balcony, the bay blinking back at me, and let my fear say what it needed to say. What if this fails? What if I'm not enough? What if mercy runs out? Madison came out with 2 mugs of chamomile. What's the monster under the bed saying? That I'm playing grown-up with other people's lives. She blew on her tea, then handed me a mug. You're not playing. And they're not other people. They're us on a different day. I looked at her. What if I forgive and it doesn't hold? Then you forgive again, she said, stealing Grandpa's line without knowing it. You keep spending the thing that grows when you give it away. I smiled into my tea. I hate that you're right. I hate that you need me to say it. But I'll keep saying it anyway. We opened Violet House on a Friday morning under a sky that looked scrubbed clean. No ribbon cutting, just a door unlocked and a sign that said welcome. I wore jeans and a white shirt and my grandmother's pressed violet tucked in a small frame on the front desk. People came. Not a flood. A trickle. 3 women looking for a place to sit without being sold anything. A teenager asking if he could borrow a laptop to apply for a job. A man with gentle eyes who needed to print a form to get his medication renewed. A mother who whispered, "Don't put us on your social media, please," and I promised we never would. We gave out meals. We made copies. We called a landlord and asked for one more week. We found a lawyer who liked our mission and offered hours pro bono. We sent a text to a volunteer group and they arrived with backpacks for kids who were pretending not to be scared. It wasn't dramatic. It was steady. Like a heartbeat someone had been listening for and finally found. Around noon, I stepped into the back office to breathe and stared at the ledger. The names we were writing now were new: Andre, interview shoes. Marisol, deposit shortfall. Jerome, bus pass to see his mom. The amounts were small. The impact was not. I took a photo of the first page of the new entries and sent it to Grandpa. Spending it freely, I typed. No response came. I sent another, a picture of the lobby, the sunlight on the floor, Madison laughing with an elderly woman who complained that our coffee was too fancy and then drank 3 cups. Still nothing. My chest tightened. I called him. It rang. And rang. Then went to voicemail with his gentle voice telling me he would call back when he was done being stubborn. When the call ended, I saw the missed notification. Michelle, Evelyn. He's at St. Bridget's. Come now. Hospitals always smell like the truth. Bright and clean and somehow deeply tired. Michelle met me in the hall, her face composed, her eyes too bright. He's been asking for you, she said, leading me to a room where time had slowed to the exact pace of a heartbeat on a monitor. Grandpa lay there smaller than the world allowed him to be. He opened his eyes when I came close and smiled like I was a gift. You opened the door, he whispered. We did, I said, taking his hand. I sent you pictures. He nodded. I saw them in my head. I laughed and cried at the same time. That's not how phones work. That's how love works, he said. We sat quietly. The monitor argued with the silence in polite intervals. I'm sorry, he said suddenly. For what? For the years I taught everyone to be impressed by me, instead of close to me. I squeezed his fingers. You're here now. He turned his head slightly, the effort visible. Promise me you'll forgive her. Not because she earned it. Because you're free enough to give it. My throat closed. I'm trying. Trying is spending, he said. It multiplies. He looked past me to the window where late light angled itself like a benediction. Tell Clara I finally listened. I didn't know where to send that message. Maybe she was already here. He closed his eyes and breathed slow. Evelyn? I'm here. You didn't inherit my money. I know. You inherited my courage, he said. Use it the way she used her mercy. Spend it until you see it everywhere. His hand loosened in mine as if the world finally unclenched. The monitor kept time, then decided to stop needing to. The room didn't feel empty. It felt full. Like when a choir finishes a note and the air remembers. Michelle touched my shoulder. He went holding Violet House in his thoughts. So did I whispered. Grief is strange. It didn't drown me. It sanded me down to something honest. I found myself polishing the front desk at Violet House the next morning because the motion was simple and required nothing from the part of me that couldn't bear another goodbye. People came. We kept the door open. We added a small framed photo of Grandpa to the wall beneath the ledger, him in shirt sleeves, a rare laugh caught unguarded. I wrote a note and tucked it behind the frame. I spent it, and it came back in another face. It felt true. We held a memorial at the foundation a week later. No orchestra. No metal plaques. We told stories. Michelle spoke about the way he refused to sign a deal if he couldn't look the person in the eye and see a future they'd both be proud to inhabit. My father spoke quietly, hands folded, a man choosing presence over defense. He said, Robert taught me to measure wealth by the courage it gives you to be kind. My mother stood at the edge of the room with a letter in her hand. I knew which one it was. After the speeches, she approached me on the terrace where the city stretched out like a promise we could finally keep. "I want to volunteer," she said, barely louder than the wind. I blinked. "At Violet House?" She nodded. "At the front desk. The part where you learn people's names. I'm not good at that. But I want to be." I waited for the old scripts to arrive: superiority, performance, control, and when they didn't, I let myself believe her. "Okay," I said. "There are shifts on Tuesdays." "I can do Tuesdays," she said. "Anne. I'll bring coffee." I laughed. "Not too fancy." She smiled, small, unadorned. "Not too fancy." The first Tuesday she came, she wore jeans and a cardigan that tried too hard not to be expensive. She was awkward with the computer, impatient with the copier, and startlingly gentle with a young mother who'd forgotten paperwork and burst into tears in the lobby. "It's okay," my mother said, the words sounding new in her mouth. "Come sit. We'll make a list together." They did. It took 20 minutes. At the end, the woman hugged her. My mother didn't know what to do with her hands for a second, and then she figured it out. On a break, she stood in the doorway of my office and looked at the ledger. "Clara would hate how tidy my handwriting is," she said with a breathy laugh that held both affection and regret. She said real kindness is messy. "It is," I said. "We're learning." She traced a name on the page with her finger. "So am I." We didn't say sorry that day. We spent it instead, with time and attention and a stack of bus passes we both signed off on because a man needed to get to work and the city didn't wait. The Malibu house sold quietly. The proceeds split, restitution where it belonged, a portion placed into an endowment that would keep our door propped open when the news moved on. I drove down once before we handed over the keys and walked the beach at dawn. I left a violet at the edge of the water and watched the tide decide what to keep. On the drive back, I stopped at St. Bridget's and sat in the small chapel where light fell in squares across the floor. I told Grandpa about our Tuesday shifts and how Mom now labeled the file drawers with painter's tape and slanted block letters like she was trying on casual. I told him the coffee was no longer too fancy and the copier only jammed when the city inspector arrived. I told him I'd said no to a reporter who wanted a tour because Violet House was not an exhibit. "Spend it quietly," I said into the stillness. "It compounds." I didn't expect an answer. The quiet didn't need to speak to be true. We held a small ceremony for the official naming. No press. Just the people who had already written themselves into our pages. Luis the carpenter hung the sign, Violet House, with careful hands. The bodega owner brought empanadas again and said she'd keep bringing them until I accepted payment. I told her she'd die before I took her money. She said, "Good, I plan to live a long time." I gave a short speech because people were looking at me and I'd learned not to hide from that. "This house is not here to rescue anyone," I said. "It's here to remind you that you were never a problem to be solved. You are a person to be accompanied. We don't measure worth here. We learn your name and ask what you need, and if we can help, we do. If we can't, we find someone who can. And when we fail, and we will, we try again tomorrow. Because love isn't a prize. It's a practice." There was a quiet after that, the kind you don't rush. Then someone clapped. Then everyone did. And then we opened the door, again, because that's the point. Late that afternoon, as the light turned the lobby golden, my father walked in carrying a box. "Tools," he said, setting it down. "I can fix the back door." "It sticks." I raised an eyebrow. "Since when do you fix doors?" "Since the man who used to pay other people to fix things realized his hands still work." We went to the back hallway together. He took off his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and knelt at the hinge with a small screwdriver. I watched his face settle into concentration, a quiet competence he'd hidden behind suits for years. "You know," he said without looking up, "when you were little, you would line your crayons up by temperature, cool to warm, and insist that colors had feelings." "They do," I said. He smiled, tightened the last screw, and stood. He pushed the door. It opened without complaint. So do hinges. We laughed. It felt easy. It felt like we had time. Before we closed that evening, a young man came in, cap pulled low, shoulders tight like regret had built a room inside him and locked the door. He hovered near the entrance as if kindness might blow him over. I stepped forward. "Hi. I'm Eve." He glanced up. "Hey. I'm just looking." "Okay," I said. "We have coffee. And a quiet room. And someone who knows how to translate DMV forms into human." He almost smiled. Do you help with?" "I mean," he swallowed. "I messed up. My mom won't answer my calls. I want to go home. I don't know how." I nodded. "Do you know what time she usually gets off work?" He shook his head. "She works 2 jobs. I lost track of her schedule. Of everything." "Okay," I said, eyes stinging with recognition that wasn't mine alone. "Let's try anyway." We sat at the front desk. My mother watched us for a moment, then quietly pulled a chair over and sat. Her voice was gentle. "What's her name?" He told us. We looked up a number. We left a message together, simple, honest, asking for a time and a place and a chance. He wrote it out first on paper, crossing out blame until only love remained. Then he read it into the phone. When he hung up, his hands shook. "She might not call," he whispered. "She might," my mother said. "And if she doesn't, you can borrow our phone tomorrow and try again." He nodded, crying without hiding it. He took a tissue from the box and stared at the ledger on the desk. "What's that?" "A list of what we spend," I said. "Money?" "Kindness," I said. He exhaled like someone opening a window. "I thought that ran out." "It doesn't," I said. "Not here." He came back the next day. She called. They met on our front steps and hugged a long time. My mother stood inside the door with a hand over her mouth and learned something about apologies that no letter could teach. Weeks turned into months. Mercy collected compound interest in 100 tiny lines in a book only we read. We made mistakes. We said sorry. We learned faster than our fear. On a rain-glossed evening, I walked from Violet House to the hill where I could see the bay flex into night. I thought of my grandmother handing a widow rent in an envelope without a lecture. I thought of my grandfather handing me a key with a lifetime attached. I thought of my mother, of Tuesdays, of labels written in a new handwriting she was learning to trust. I took out my phone and typed a message I couldn't send. We opened the door. People walked through. "I spent what you left me, and somehow I have more of it now." I tucked the unsent message into my pocket, the way you tuck a prayer into a wall. When I got home, the apartment felt different. Not bigger. Just mine. I made tea. I watered the plant I keep forgetting I own and it forgave me again. I sat on the couch and let the quiet sit with me like a friend who doesn't need you to be interesting. My phone buzzed. A text from Madison. "New volunteer wants Thursday nights." Said Violet House feels like a place where nobody's being auditioned for their own life. I smiled. Tell them that's the point. I opened my laptop and wrote a note to the Heart Foundation board, a policy I wanted to codify. No photos without permission.no means testing mercy.no naming rooms after donors.name people. Say thanks. Move on, keep the door open. I added one more line and underlined it. Spend it freely. Months later, on what would have been Grandpa's birthday, we held a small gathering at Violet House. No speech. Just a circle. We each said one sentence about a time we were given something when we had nothing to offer in return. Then we passed the ledger around and let people write their names next to the moments they were brave enough to claim. When it came back to me, I stared at the page and saw not a list but a map, a way back to each other. I stepped outside for air. The evening had that particular San Francisco blue that makes the streetlights honest. My mother joined me, hands tucked into the pockets of a coat she'd had for years and was finally wearing like it belonged to a person, not a photograph. I give terrible tours, she said. I told someone the copier was sensitive and now everyone whispers at it. I laughed. It is sensitive. She looked at me, really looked. Thank you for letting me try. Thank you for trying, I said. A long pause. The deep kind. I'm sorry, she said. Not as performance. As inventory. I know, I said. Not as absolution. As acknowledgement. We stood there, not fixing the past, not pretending it didn't hurt, choosing the work of the present. It was enough. It was everything. On the way home, I detoured past Atelier Cren. The same chandeliers. The same marble. A different woman in a black dress sitting at a table practicing a smile. I caught her eye through the glass and lifted my hand like a blessing. She lifted hers back, surprised into honesty. Outside, the fog slipped down the street like a curtain closing on an act we no longer needed to perform. I went home. I washed my face. I set the key on the nightstand and turned off the light, and in the dark I heard my grandmother's voice the way you hear your own thoughts when they finally tell the truth. The rich inherit money. The wounded inherit mercy. Spend it freely, and you will never run out. I slept without waking. In the morning I would unlock the door again and write a few more lines in a ledger that felt more like a love letter to a city that had given me both silence and a way to break it. And if you'd been hurt by people who were supposed to love you, if your inheritance was doubt, or distance, or a silence that made you smaller, hear me. You can spend a different currency now. A look that says I see you. A meal that says stayed. A call that says come home when you're ready. A key that opens a door no one else thought to try. Spend it again, watch it multiply in the eyes that meet yours. And if this story felt like your story, stay. There's room at Violet House, and in the next story, for you. If this resonated with you, share it with someone who needs a door held open. Subscribe if you'd like to keep walking with me. We'll keep the light on.